Hello lovely viewers, you are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be discussing the detailed analysis of Africa My Africa by David Diop. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. David Diop is a French novelist, poet, and an academician who specialized in French and Francophone literature. He was born to a Senegalese father and a Cameroonian mother in 1927. After primary education in both Senegal and Cameroon, he spent most of his years in France. After the Second World War, he visited Senegal and later returned to teach there. In August 1960, he was killed together with his wife in an air crash near Dakar. Most of his poems were destroyed in the air crash. However, he had already published about 22 poems. Some of his famous outstanding poems include the following: Africa, My Africa, The Vultures, Your Presence, and Certitude. He is well known for his contribution to the Negritude literary movement. His works reflect his deep anti-colonial stance, which suggests words of optimism and encouragement to the battered, cheated, marginalized, and overexploited people of Africa. Africa, My Africa by David Diop is a classical example of a Negritudian poem. Negritude was an ideology which aimed, among other things, to react against the devastating effects of colonialism and cultural deprivation the black people experienced in the hands of the Western world. The Negritude literary movement sought to revive through literature the cultural values and identities of the African and to praise ancestral glories and the beauty of Africa through the renunciation of whatever is Western. The Negritude literary movement sought to emphasize the value of the civilization of the African world and the contribution of the black race to human civilization. We can say with all certainty that this poem, Africa, My Africa, is a Negritudian poem because it expresses deep sadness and sympathy for what Africa has become as a result of their encounter with the Western world and all the continent had to endure in the hands of the Europeans. This poem does not only recall the events in Africa's historical past, but also embodies the hope for a different and better future for the African continent. The poem theologizes the tenacity of the African continent and its inhabitants. It captures the experiences that constitute part of Africa's identity today, as well as the belief that a rebirth is achievable for the African continent. The persona of the poem, Africa, My Africa, is a proud African who defends the African continent and everything in it. It is worth noting that the speaker of the poem does not stay in Africa but is living in another country. This can be seen in the lines, "I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins." You can sense how much he misses his homeland by his stress on the word Africa and how he continues to call it My Africa, to emphasize that it is his land and his feeling of patriotism towards it. His choice of word, distant, from the line, on the banks of a distant river, again symbolize how far he is from his country. All he knows of Africa is what he heard from his grandmother's songs. Thus, his grandmother may be telling him a story of Africa to satisfy his curiosity since he is a child. The poem serves as a wake-up call, not just to the African continent, but also to everyone who continues to live in oppression. The poem is a dramatic monologue, where the speaker seems to be having a conversation with the African continent. The poem itself falls into three distinct parts, which in highly emotional language present Africa's past, her present humiliation, and her triumphant future of liberation from the yoke of colonialism. Thematically, the poem shares light on the pre-colonial Africa, colonial Africa, and post-colonial Africa, and the injustice and exploitation suffered by Africans during this period. It is important to bear in mind right from the onset that David Diop wrote his poems in French, and the version of the poem we are studying was translated from French into English. Even though this translation may be able to capture the power and suggestiveness of the French original, the sound effects achieved in the original language are quite impossible to achieve in the translation. It is also good to remember that the poet, David Diop, was born in Bordeaux, in France, and was educated in that country. However, his view of Africa is no less intense for the fact that it is based to a large extent on imagined and perhaps idealized terrain. Let's take our first reading of the poem. Africa, my Africa. Africa of proud warriors in ancestral savannah. Africa of whom my grandmother sings. On the bank of the distant river. I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins. Your beautiful black blood that irrigates the field. The blood of your sweat. The sweat of your work. The work of your slavery. The slavery of your children. Africa, tell me, Africa, is this your back that is bent? This back that breaks under the weight of humiliation? This back trembling with red scars and saying no to the waves under the midday sun? But a grave voice answered me, the tree over there, impetuous child, that tree, young and strong, splendidly alone amidst white and faded flowers. That is your Africa springing up anew, springing up patiently, obstinately, whose fruits, bit by bit, acquire the bitter taste of liberty. Let's now take a detailed analysis of the lines contained in the poem. Africa, my Africa. Africa of proud warriors in ancestral savannah. Africa of whom my grandmother sings. On the bank of the distant river. I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins. The poem begins by David Diop reminiscing about Africa, a land he has not seen, but only heard about it from his grandmother's songs. His choice of words like distance symbolizes how far he is from his country, a feeling based on his real life as he lived in France throughout his childhood and only visited Africa in the 1950s. Despite this, he paints a vivid picture of the African continent and the proud warriors who walk on its ancestral savannah. You can sense how much he misses his homeland by his stress on the word Africa and how he continues to call it my Africa to emphasize that it is his land and his feeling of patriotism towards it. In the opening lines of the poem, the persona, who is imbued with profound love for its continent, indicates that affection by referring to Africa as my Africa. The second line offers a glorious picture of the African past, taking the reader's mind to a time when Zulu and Maasai warriors faced the enemy in the grasslands. One gets the impression that David Diop is romanticizing the African past, making it appear more splendid than it may actually have been. The rather emotional, perhaps even sentimental presentation of the African continent continues in the third line with the images of the grandmother singing on the banks of the river, an idyllic rural image which presents Africa as a land of tranquility and melody until the Europeans came with their violence. David Diop is, of course, offering us a typical negritude view of pre-colonial Africa as a kind of paradise or Eden, which was destroyed by the invading Europeans. Diop's persona continues wistfully that, though his grandmother knew this Africa intimately and sings of it, he himself has been denied the chance to know the beautiful land. Your beautiful black blood that irrigates the field, the blood of your sweat, the sweat of your work, the work of your slavery, the slavery of your children. The black soil condition of Africa following the European conquest is developed. First, we are presented with an image of an African blood irrigating the field or plantations, a hyperbole suggesting the cruel manner in which the Africans were made to till plantations in America, Brazil, and the Caribbean for the profits of the white man. In a manner typical of negritude, which tends to glorify everything black or African, the persona rather sentimentally describes black blood as beautiful, recalling Sartre's characterization of the attitude of negritude as anti-racist racism. All human blood is red, and the blood of African is no more beautiful than the blood of Europeans. However, it is European racism which first declared that white blood is superior to black blood. The poet is merely responding to the racism of the Europeans. The next four lines of the poem, which are anaphoric, all beginning with a definite article, and all with the same grammatical structure, present a neat progression of the agony of the African continent at the hands of the Europeans. The repetitive structure of these lines enact the prolonged quality of the African suffering, which is made to appear like something destined to go on forever. Africa, tell me, Africa, is this your back that is bent? This back that breaks under the weight of humiliation? This back, trembling with red scars and saying no to the whip under the midday sun? The speaker personifies Africa as a slave laboring under the oppressor's yoke, his back covered with scars as he is whipped into submission under the midday sun, and wonders compassionately if this humiliation and suffering is all Africa is destined to endure. He urges the black people to stand up to the pain and humiliation that they are faced with in the hands of the Europeans. He reminds them of the strength and pride they have in themselves and to say no to the whips of the colonialists, which makes them work under the hot midday sun and leave scars on their backs. Despite this suffering, he urges them to be strong and remain unbent and not let this break them despite the weight of humiliation. But a grave voice answered me, that tree over there, impetuous child, that tree, young and strong, splendidly alone, amidst white and faded flower, that is your Africa springing up anew, springing up patiently, obstinately, whose fruits, bit by bit, acquired a bitter taste of liberty. This point of the poem enters the third part, in which the persona offers an optimistic image of the African's future. The question the persona poses to the humiliated Africa is answered by a grave voice, the voice of the ancestors perhaps, or the voice of a sage, which directs the impatient persona's gaze to a young tree rising in splendor amid faded white flowers. In obvious symbolism, the young tree represents the resurgent Africa, while the faded flower represents a defeated Europe. The rising tide of youthful nationalism will triumph over Europe's crumbling civilization, but it will not be an easy victory. It will be slow in coming, and Africa's freedom will only be won at the end of a bitter struggle, as suggested by the paradox with which the poem is concluded. And its fruits gradually acquires a bitter taste of victory. The tree, young and strong, represent the young people of Africa who are patiently but obstinately waiting until they get the liberty they want. At the moment, the tree is alone, meaning the African struggle is a lonely battle, but they will achieve the freedom and liberty they want no matter how bitter the taste is getting. It is among the white and faded flowers, by which the poet means that the colonialists will eventually fade in time, while the youthful Africans grow in strength and wait for their moment of freedom. David Diop's Africa, in the manner of a typical negritude poem, expresses deep love for Africa and sympathy for what she has endured and suffered at the hands of the European invaders. Again, in the manner of a negritude writer, Diop presents their opposition to the European in racial terms. Africans are black and have been subjugated to cruel oppression because of their color. Africans' enemies are white and will soon be defeated by the rising force of African nationalism. David Diop's Africa is an inspirational poem about Africa's revolutionary struggle against European domination. The persona takes pride in Africans' ancestral glory, sympathizes with the suffering under slavery and colonialism, and looks forward to her eventual liberation through revolutionary struggle. The major themes in this poem include the following: hope for the Africa's future, bestialities of colonialism, exploitation of the African continent, the need for liberation of freedom, the pride in blackness, oppression, and humiliation. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.